So your uncle went to meet them and talk about that?
Under the Key Bridge. I seen his car was still there this morning. Seen that, I fucking knew.
If they killed your uncle to shut him up, they probably...
Want to kill me too? Shit. I was gonna go down with him to the bridge. I was gonna go down there with him. He wouldn't.
Alex Cottrell and Toby Huntingford present Caught on the Wire. This podcast is an episode-by-episode analysis of HBO's widely acclaimed TV series about the city of Baltimore, its people, and its many problems. Find more information about the show and all the episodes online at caughtonthewire.wordpress.com.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Hello again, welcome back to Caught on the Wire. We've finally made it, another milestone. We're here at a finale. This time it is Port in a Storm, Season 2, Episode 12. And as always, I'm incredibly excited. And it's not only just the end of a season, we're also Episode 25. It's quite a big mark for us. And we're really approaching the halfway point of our expedition here through the show. So it's really brewing up now, isn't it, Alex? How are you doing today?
Yeah, like you say, very excited for the finale. Can't believe that we're here again.
Yeah.
Feels like only yesterday we did the Season 1 finale. It is just the two of us this time. We don't have a special guest on this occasion.
Apologies, guys.
But yeah, so I've just spent the whole day today finally enjoying GTA 5 on PC. So it's been my time, getting a bit of gaming in on my day off.
No last-minute podcast prep?
Oh no, I did that all over the weekend. I was ready. I was all ready.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's the same for me actually. I did my prep this time last week, so I'm normally a little bit more close to the show. I had a bit fresher in mind, so hopefully that won't hurt it at all. It's a very memorable episode nonetheless, so I think that should be good. I mean, how have you been enjoying GTA 5? I know it's been something you've been anticipating since it came out on consoles, which is about a year and a half ago or so.
Oh yeah, it's great. I mean, I'm loving it so far. It's could do with a bit of a patch, but other than that, it's fine. It's everything I kind of hoped it would be, really.
Ah, sweet.
So very much enjoying it.
Excellent.
I'm also anxious to get on to Season 3, really. Like, I'm looking forward to just ploughing straight on after this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Season 2 characters, but I'm really, I want to get to the Cartettis and the Cutties and the Colvins. You know what I mean? Like, there's some really great things that we haven't quite reached yet. So, just like you, I'm really.
It's also because this episode does lead into Season 3 quite nicely. There's quite a few bits where and this is where we're heading next. Kind of.
Yeah. There
are a lot of moments like that. So, yeah, it kind of made me excited for Season 3.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've actually jumped ahead a little bit and started noting down the first episode. So we'll come back next week, I imagine, to do that. There'll be no delay.
Yeah, not anticipating one, no.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Sweet. I guess it's not just a new week for the world of computer games, though. It's also a new week for Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah, of course.
It's also
watched that yesterday.
Did you see it?
Oh, it's amazing. You not watched it yet?
Oh, I've seen it. Don't worry. Yeah, I've seen it first. It was. I mean, the budget's gone up again. That's probably the most noticeable thing. Otherwise, it's just a very standard Game of Thrones opener with just catching up with people and moving things on a little bit.
I felt like they've really got the style down, though. They've really nailed it now.
Yeah. If you think back to season 1,
the whole feel of the show has been very perfectly captured now, and although it is still hammed up in places, I guess that's what you expect from that kind of high fantasy style. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic. What about you?
Yeah, I was impressed. I feel like the show is really becoming this epic kind of hype fest. So I know there were a lot of people that were disappointed with the episode, mainly because it was a starting episode and people were, hoping for an end of season reveal at this point in the show, and that's just not going to happen. So I think as long as you manage your expectations, it's a great start. they're clearly going in a good direction. I like that characters are moving around. There's been a big shuffle up, so to speak. It's freshening things up quite nicely. So I'm very excited to see where it goes, and we're both non-book readers, so we really are in the dark, aren't we?
Yeah, it's all new.
Yeah. And I hear that Marvel have a new show on Netflix just released, right? Daredevil, which is meant to be fantastic. It's meant to be.
I've not. Yeah, I think we put it on a couple of nights ago. I think we put the first episode on, but I wasn't really watching it. I didn't pay attention, so I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Yeah.
Did watch the last episode of Better Call Saul though.
Oh yeah, yeah. Same.
Which really didn't feel like a final episode. It was slightly anticlimactic. I'm not really sure why. It was good. I enjoyed it, but
yeah, it was clearly going for something a bit different, wasn't it?
it had a very muted ending, which was curious.
Yeah, it was kind of they were kind of drawing the similarities with Breaking Bad, I think, at the end when Saul was like, "I'm never making that mistake again." He's Breaking Bad at that moment. I guess that's what the first season was kind of telling the story of how Saul goes from wanting to be straight to being crooked.
Yeah.
And it was an odd finale. I agree. It wasn't something that I was that satisfied with, but it's made me more excited for the second season. Definitely, I feel like the show's really kind of made its point now, and we know kind of what the show's about and how it feels compared to Breaking Bad. So I'm very excited. Did
you see the trailer for True Detective season 2?
I did, yeah. Very much of a tease rather than anything that exciting, but it's good to see what actors are involved with it.
It didn't have that kind of freshness to it that I thought the season 1 kind of reveals had.
Yeah.
It seems like a little bit more, I don't know, not procedural, but it just didn't grab me in the same way that the first season did.
I agree, yeah. I think it's probably just because it's a tease, and I think the actors... I'm not a massive fan of Colin Farrell, and Vince Vaughn is an interesting choice.
Yeah.
He's maybe on the verge of a Vince Vaughn assance or whatever, however you want to brand it, but he hasn't been in particularly good things for the last 10 years or so. So it's nice to see him doing something very different. But it looks like they're going to follow the same format of interviews, kind of POV interviews, interlaced with the action. By the looks of the trailer, so I thought they might go for a slightly more completely different theme than that, since it's going to be an anthology. But maybe they want something to kind of keep it consistent throughout the seasons.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's this time of year is always very good for telly. Mad Men's just come back as well, but we can't really forget about The Wire.
Yeah, we will have to move on.
We will have to move on, nor of our listeners. We've again received another couple of emails this week. So we heard from our man Dave Gunter from Las Vegas, as we stand corrected actually. I believe we believed he was from Los Angeles last week, which is just not true. Dave was just kind of saying how he's very caught up with us now. He's up to where we are, and he's going to go back to season 1 soon on YouTube. Once he's finished, and he just sort of spoke a lot about the points we made, and told us a little bit about himself, and because he works as a courier, he's able to listen to podcasts kind of all day, which is a really nice aspect. That would be something I'd enjoy. I probably could as well, but I just don't have the multitasking talent to kind of work and listen.
He drops a few other podcast names as well.
Yeah,
Joe Rogan. I assume he means the Joe Rogan Experience, which I've listened to a little bit. I don't listen to it regularly, but I used to. But I usually dip in and out now if there's guests that I'm interested in, and they can be kind of interesting.
Yeah,
Joe Rogan's a bit of a character, so it's kind of nice.
They're very long, aren't they? And most of the guests I haven't heard of, so I'm never really that tempted to listen to them. But yeah, occasionally it does come out with a great episode. Definitely. But yeah, I mean, Dave sent us a real mammoth email, which is great to read through, actually. There's a lot of material talking about comparing it to different shows, really. He's compared it to The Sopranos, he did last week, Breaking Bad. And I guess the point is really that while these shows are great, The Wire, again, always triumphs. So it's nice to hear all these points. So yeah, thanks very much, Dave. And stay in contact with us and keep listening. Because we do appreciate your correspondence with us. And we also got another long email from Rob Romeo.
I should also clarify as well regarding Dave's email that
Yeah.
when we read out his email last week, we were doing it like somewhat ironically. I feel
Yeah.
like maybe it's the British humour. I don't know. It may have been lost a little bit. So
Yeah, I think we suggested there may be fake fans as opposed to real fans. But don't worry, we weren't being serious. It was just a little gesture. So, but yeah, absolutely. So just there's no understanding. And we'll quickly move on to Rob. So Rob is a new listener. He's just discovered us while he's preparing for a business trip. And he's very impressed with the analysis, which is great to hear. And, you know, really feels the passion in the show. And he's watched season 2 for about the 10th time, which means he's definitely more seasoned than I am. I don't know about you, Alex.
yeah, 10 times is a lot. I don't think I've watched it 10 times.
Absolutely not. And the HD copies is giving him another reason to go back to it, which is always good.
It would be very interesting to watch the whole thing again in HD. I've got to say.
Yeah, well, it
Might
won't
have to
be
give it a
long
bit
now.
after doing this, but one day definitely.
Yeah, I imagine by the time we get to like season 4 or 5, the Blu-ray way may well have dropped, and we might be able to do that. So that would be.
He seems to have had a
great.
similar experience to Damon as well, because he talks about the Ella Thompson Fund and the events that they had with the tours of the prop department and everything, and he had a somewhat similar experience to Damon, who emailed us in, I think, during the first season, where he was saying that because he was an extra and like his father had a small part in the show, he'd kind of got to meet all these characters and the actors and said how they were all very nice people. So it's really nice to hear that the behind the scenes was a really positive experience as well. I can't really imagine what it must have been like to really be on the production of that show, but it must have been one hell of an experience.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So always glad to hear stories about that. Anyone
Insider
who's
info.
got an insider, yeah, exactly, insider info.
I believe Damon had a lot to offer. He'd been to a sort of end of season party by the sounds of things, which is great to hear about. Rob also has a wire souvenir. He has a Valchek's bird from the stained glass window,
Oh yeah,
which is it's quite a nice. Don't know where you managed to find that. Some sort of antique shop maybe, but that's cool. So there's a whole lot of stories here. We clearly have some fans that are very close to the show, and we're quite honoured for that. You know, it's good to see this stuff. And Deirdre Lovejoy is a standout cast member for Rob.
yeah. So Deirdre Lovejoy, obviously, Rhonda Perlman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any more emails or anything like that, or is that listeners calling her for the week?
That's us for that week. It was only 2 emails, but they were both very lengthy and very interesting reads. So thanks very much, guys, and please keep things coming in. We always love to hear from our fans. It's why we do the show, really. So absolutely keep them coming. And with that 12 minutes of various chat and ramble, we'll now give you your main course. I'll pass you over to Alex for the recap.
Yep, it's time for the recap.
Okay, Alex, so I hear that we are going to be graced with 21 sections today. How's that for a finale of an episode?
Yeah, it's jam-packed for sure. Broken it up into 5 larger parts, which, like you say, is broken into 21 sections. A couple of them are very big, a couple of them are very large, because the episode is so, well, dense, like I mentioned before. I think it was quite helpful in the recap to keep some of the sections quite large still, try not to take out too much just because it serves as a good refresher, and just because so much happens in this episode, so... I apologise that some of them are pretty big. But,
no apologies needed.
Most of them are
More the
normal
better.
sized. It's okay. The rest are unintimidating, I promise.
Yeah.
But let's start with our first full section, as it were, which is going to be about our doc business. I mean, everything's really very interconnected in this episode, but we'll focus on the docs to begin with. And our first section. So, Claude Diggins pulls a corpse from the water, and the dock workers that begin to gather eventually recognise the body as Frank Sobotka. Meanwhile, Nick Sabonka goes looking for Frank as he does not return from his meeting with the Greek. He too gathers with the others at the docks eventually and sees Frank's body brought ashore. So our opening scene, basically.
That's right, yeah. And we're kind of returning directly after a cliffhanger from Bad Dreams. And I noticed there's kind of two ways that shows deal with cliffhangers. They either have the Breaking Bad, Walking Dead approach, where you kind of take off directly from the moment we left them, kind of just resolving the issue. Or we can go for this kind of path where we return to kind of subversive, calm, everything is normal opening, and we're left to work our way through the tension of gradually discovering the worst fears. So they definitely went down this option, and nice to see.
I can see why as well.
Yeah,
because it makes sense in regards to what The Wire is as a show stylistically. That idea of voyeurism and the fact that we kind of learn these details by hearing about them through characters' communications, like it's meant to tap, it's, you know, to, if you'll excuse the pun, tap into that idea of The Wire and things being intercepted, and that we learn things gradually, and, you know, it works here rather than us following it all the way through, step by step. That's not really The Wire's style.
Yeah, and The Wire likes to leave things to the imagination, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely likes to do that. Whereas something like Breaking Bad, which you used as a counterexample, is far more direct. It's kind of more fantastical, I guess, in that way. In the fact that we know an awful lot, and almost things that we, because of the style of the show, it has a certain seriousness and gravity about it that's very, almost melodramatic in some ways. So it's kind of meant to be like
it did on occasions work against the show, didn't it? I think Breaking Bad, because there's that bit towards the end of season 5, a very momentous scene with Hank. I won't spoil it for anyone, but that's right at the start of an episode following a cliffhanger, and it kind of loses the momentum that it should have had and the gravity that it should have had that moment. So it's nice that they kind of go for this way of doing it.
It's that age-old problem.
Yeah.
Climaxing too fast.
Yep. And with all this returning to normal atmosphere, we kind of get a nice few callbacks to the early episodes of the season. It almost feels like we're being reintroduced to the docks, with the radio chatter, the nice sunny morning. Well, we're now in the height of summer, so perhaps that's kind of a difference. But Ott is now our union leader down in the office, kind of investigating the day, taking the cigarette, opening the door of the office. Claude's boat, digging out a body again. It's that familiarity. So, you know, I guess that kind of all leads up to the fishing out and gathering around, which is a very impressive scene, and one of the HD sample scenes that we got to see, actually, where they sampled the additional width of the frame to show everyone kind of gathered around Frank.
It did look very different in that HD shot. That's true. That wider angle, because the gathering crowd is a very interesting part of this scene. Slowly, everyone collecting by the dockside. It's also worth noting another, as has become somewhat common in this season, the music diegesis rule breaking that we've had on quite a few occasions, and it does it again here, where it sort of slips into the music that he's listening to, doesn't it? Kind of like I'm trying to remember how it starts now. Yeah,
I think it's isn't it a radio in the dock office, and then that music expands out into the wider docks. Yeah.
There's kind of like I can't remember it exactly for some reason, but there's that segue, and the music itself sort of gets filtered differently, and it sort of crosses over and to create a sort of soundtrack in a way that doesn't normally do. You know, The Wire, generally speaking, doesn't have a soundtrack.
Although having said that, The Wire's been doing it a lot recently. We've seen plenty of montages. Yeah.
That's what I was saying. In this season, it's become very commonplace. I don't think there are many other seasons that are like that. Season 2 is more stylized, generally speaking.
It really goes quite gritty and back to basics with 3, 4, and 5, from what I remember.
Yeah, like the bit with Ziggy, for example, when you have that slow shutter speed to kind of simulate this, delusions, paranoia, state of fear and everything. Yeah, just becoming completely dead to the world for a second, like you're just stuck in this strange zone.
Yeah.
That's not something that The Wire would normally do. We would normally see it from a very much an outsider's perspective.
Yeah.
As though we were a man on the street. So.
Yeah.
It's unusual for The Wire.
Yeah, it's good here. It kind of gets the theme going. I think that what I was struck by most in the scene, I really wanted to know what was going through the stevedores' heads, particularly Ott, who at least knew to some extent of Frank's shady activities. I'd love to know how much they knew about Frank and whether they understood the cause of his death or not, and whether it's complete bewilderment or inevitability. We really don't understand what these stevedores are thinking, really. It's very Frank-focused.
Yeah, that's again another hallmark of The Wire, the ambiguity of it all, which is nice. I thought it was incredibly brutal. There's that. It's almost, even though it's only happened once before, it almost feels like a calling card that we see Frank's throat having been cut. And we just think back to that scene with the supposedly Turkish guy from the boat. It just made me think immediately back. It is almost like a calling card of the Greeks. There's Spiros there, and he cuts the throat, and he even says later, obviously he was the one that did it. So
a signature for them. Although thankfully, without Sergei around, they can't go any further and get rid of his fingernails or fingerprints or face. So,
which is the reference only slightly after that, in chronologically in the episode. Where we see the pictures of those headless and handless people. Which again, it's just really, it's really brutal.
Absolutely.
Just seeing Frank there, having been cut and everything, it's horrific.
Although it's odd that because those pictures are shown in the context of landsmen flinging them around an office, it kind of distances the viewer from them quite a lot, though.
That's very
you're
true.
not in the horror of them, as Breaking Bad might put you, for example, as we were discussing, a show that goes the length to show you all these things for the pure drama of it.
So that's pretty much that little section, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that was good. Does that include the stuff where landsman turns up and the police turn up, or are we going on to that?
That's not actually in that section. That was just, I mentioned that chronologically in the episode, that's what happens next.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, the next section, later in Frank's office, Nick has to be restrained from going after the Greek. His father, Louis, arrives and then takes Nick to the southeastern headquarters to turn himself in. Freeman happens to overhear Nick's processing and brings him to the detail. That doesn't include the bit where he's actually with the detail. That's just what we see.
Yeah.
In
That definitely
bit.
deserves its own bit. It's a great scene. This is also a great scene. A very short scene. Nick with a very understandable rage. And nice that Louis kind of gets his final moment as well. With that look of disgrace and disappointment on his face.
Oh, it's incredible. It's such a devastatingly long pause.
It's grisly and very scary. Yeah, he's become quite an important character, really. Well, not important, but you really feel the gravity of that disappointment, despite the fact he's only been on screen about twice.
There's only that one scene where we see him with the betting and everything, that it's the only scene that he's in that feels a little more, I don't know, carefree, I suppose you could say.
Yeah.
Whereas normally if Louis turns up, there's something serious happening.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I don't have an awful lot to say about the scene, but I did think it was a logical scene and worked well.
It was nice, yeah. And then obviously, somewhat fortunately for Freeman, he happens to be there at the exact same time as Nick arrives. And he actually says, it's interesting that he comes in and says, "Have you got something for me, or is there anything for me?" Something like that.
Yeah.
And it's almost a nod to the fact that, yes, there is, but he doesn't realise that it's Nick who's right there.
Yeah.
So that was kind of nice. It was, again, it's a little bit of a coincidence, maybe a little bit of creative license, but it was nice. It was a nice enough moment for it to not really be an issue.
Definitely. And I like these scenes with Louis as well. It kind of feels like they link directly to his chat with Frank in the last episode, and almost proving Louis' point as the smarter guy at the end of the day. He foresaw Nick going down this path, and here it is that they're coming home to roost now. So, yeah, good little scene. And the one with Freeman, as you say, is pretty great. Again, another coincidence. There are a number of them when you consider in The Wire. It's actually a very convenient show in many ways, but I do like that, as you say, the kind of dramatic irony of them not knowing how interrelated those two were until later on.
Now, this one's again, it was kind of difficult to break everything up into these 5 larger parts. So this one isn't as exclusively to do with the Docs, but it's related to the Docs and the Docs characters. So let's go on to our third one, which is where the Greek meets with Vondas, and they discuss their plans. The Greek decides to leave Nick alone, deeming him non-threatening, and that it's safest to walk away and abandon it, including the next drug shipment. Later, the FBI visit the Union Hall and tell them that they need to change their leadership or the Union will be decertified. Art responds by withdrawing from the election and standing behind the deceased Sabotka's re-election.
Okay.
So it's two little bits there.
So we have the first bit with the Greeks, and they're camping out at another downtown hotel suite. So that's 2 episodes in a row we've seen them living a slightly more extravagant lifestyle than we've been used to. You're seeing them outside of their work now, and I do love their chat. It's one of my favourite scenes in the episode, actually. There's some very interesting things are mentioned, particularly the "my name is not my name, I'm not even Greek."
The way the Greek says that, again, I think I've said many times before that he's quite a sinister character, but just the way he says it,
Yeah.
I'm not even Greek. It's like
it's a very very chilling.
I think he's one of the scariest characters in The Wire, just in such a insidious way. Something about him, just because he is so mysterious. Yeah, I don't know, it's beautifully done.
He is great, absolutely. There's a great conversation. Some great things are said for the audience's benefit. Although it felt a little bit kind of exposition-y. It feels like they're saying these things completely for the audience's benefit, and that they'd be obvious to Spiros and the Greek without the need to mention them. I'm not even Greek. I'm your lifelong friend. Did you know I'm not even Greek? But we kind of needed to know those things. So overall, I think it was...
I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously there's a big link here with a later character, Marlowe, who says, my name is my name, the direct opposite. And
that's true, yeah, that parallel.
I think, the Greek, this is perhaps the Greek's most important scene, and Marlowe's most important scene is right at the end of season 5 when he speaks his mind about how he feels about his position, that everything for Marlowe is about his rep and how he's perceived in the street, and for the Greek it's the complete opposite. So it's nice that the show is kind of identifying those contrasts. And I guess it's also Stringer and Avon, quite the contrast between those two is also explored a little bit through them as well. The idea of rep versus pragmatism, I guess.
So if we have our... like you say, that's kind of that scene. Really, there is a little bit of there are a few moments where it feels like it's purely for our benefit, but generally speaking, it's pretty enjoyable and a bit more sort of sinister behind the scenes stuff. A bit more of seeing them putting a bit of money into something rather than being constantly in some kind of incognito.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the second half was at the Union Hall.
Yeah, so
we have the FBI visiting.
Yeah, so that's where's that? So yeah, that's when Ott refuses to run for the election, right? Once he hears that the FBI want to come and close the place down, and I think it's mainly out of pride or mainly out of respect for Frank, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I mean, he essentially torpedoes the Union by doing it.
Yeah.
So, I guess this is a very principled stance.
Yeah. So I thought that was a very nice homage he was playing to Frank, and despite all their altercations throughout the season, we see that at the end of the day, they do stand by each other even beyond death.
Yeah.
So it was
nice, kind of brotherhood thing.
Honourable to see, definitely.
One man, one vote.
Yeah. That's it. And the FBI is now going to take their place, and the Union will fall into the hands of the federal government, as we see later on in the montage. Very sad stuff. I guess there's a couple of things I forgot to mention about the Greeks in the hotel room. How they talk about how they don't want to silence Nick. after floating the idea, and they seem to abandon working out of Baltimore altogether, as the police presence there is too hot. So we can breathe a sigh of relief for Nick there, really, because that's kind of what was on everyone's mind the whole time. Partly because of Spiros' liking for him, and because of their link to Kutris. So it's nice to see that they took the heat off him.
I guess there's a lot of risk involved, especially now that they know that they're in danger from getting caught, and they know that the police are somewhat onto them.
Yeah.
They're not going to take... the Greeks, such as they are not going to take that kind of risk. This is a group of people who can clearly, as we've seen before, afford to completely ignore shipments worth millions, to leave another shipment worth millions to just sit out on the docks and rot just because they need to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So it really is not enough of a big deal to them, someone in Nick's position, for them to risk it all during this period of great danger just to kill this one, young guy. They're not going to risk it, so...
Yeah, it makes sense, and you feel like a show that was more concerned with drama and action may well have withheld this information to keep the tension up during the episode, so that every scene with Nick would have had some tension to it, particularly those scenes at the end when he's kind of walking on his own, and it's not entirely clear whether the car following him is the FBI escort or some sort of Greek assassin.
That's true, yeah.
But by playing that card early, they did remove a lot of the tension element of the episode. And it was nice to see them lament Frank's loss as well. It's easy to think that they enjoyed killing Frank. They took pleasure in his death. But they missed Frank just as much as everyone else did. Like, that they killed their smuggler out of the port. Like, they lost a big link, a big source of money. But they had to do it.
Business, always business.
Yeah.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well that's the end of the kind of doc-specific stuff, or the doc-exclusive sections, such as they were. So let's move on to the street. Stringer Bell visits Brother Muzone's bedside at the hospital and tells him they will catch whoever was responsible for his shooting. Muzone coolly informs Stringer that he needs no assistance from them and that he'll find those responsible on his own. Stringer asks who came at Brother, but gets nothing other than thanks for his concern.
Oh, good old Brother Muzone.
Stringer actually, kind of drops the ball pretty heavy here, I think. Shouldn't Avon is actually kind of right in that regard. He shouldn't have really asked, because he does almost give himself away, and I'm although again we don't hear what the character is thinking. It's not really given away to us through some kind of melodramatic means. Brother's response is very cryptic in a way. I really wanted to know what he was thinking,
Yeah, you're right with that. Them is a big source of awkwardness, isn't it? It suddenly changes the power relationship between those two. And Stringer just kind of doesn't think on his feet at all there.
I thought it was an interesting moment for Brother Muzone because, I don't know, generally speaking, I don't find him to be a character with much depth. He just seems like a kind of, sort of comic book villain or whatever, as I mentioned before. But here, because he has to make a slightly more ambiguous decision and we don't really know what he's thinking because of the, like you say, the drama of the scene and everything that's happened and the fact that someone is, just the seriousness of the situation that Stringer has got Omar to go and kill Brother Muzone and he goes and sees him, like it's, quite a tense scene. So it's nice to see Brother Muzone involved in that, whereas before when Omar went to see him and they had their moment together, something about it felt a lot less genuine. Like
it's hyper real, wasn't it?
Omar was being just a bit, I don't know. Oh, suddenly he realizes after he's shot the guy, I don't know. Suddenly Omar becomes quite foolish by listening to Stringer.
Yeah.
So
hell-bent on that revenge. But yeah, I agree. It was a nice little scene with a lot more to it than meets the eye. Definitely, there's a lot of subtext here that doesn't get explored, it's just he's looking very young. I was just struck by how young Muzone is looking. He's one of the modern day detectives on True Detective, I think, isn't he? He's
yeah, he is. That's true.
I completely forgot about that. So he does very well in that show as well. So it's good to see him around.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good actor, but
just the character. I just find that there's a lot of scenes that have Brother Mouzone in them that don't really don't have much impact for me. I don't think something about them just feels a bit more comic-y and less of the show. And
he only gets more comic-y as season 3 comes along.
It doesn't have much kind of depth. There's not much ambiguous about him. He's just there's a certain mystery to him for sure, but
yeah,
he's just this sort of straight talking, kind of somewhat obnoxious guy who's obviously very learned and he likes his magazines. Like, did you get the right one, Lamar? You know, it's just kind of I don't know. It doesn't do anything for me.
Great impression, by the way. I thought that was genuinely Brother Mouzone at the other end there. I was going to offer you some titty mags if you got a need.
You can be my Lamar.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, do you want to do the next episode in that voice, like entirely?
The whole thing.
I could really use that. Really got me going, that voice. So.
So yeah, that's pretty simple scene, really. Just on the bedside, but Stringer really slips up there, I think.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right, the next one is pretty big section. It's quite a sizable one. So let's get cracking with that one. Bubbles and Johnny spot a drug addict who has overdosed on the new, more powerful package. While Johnny keeps watch, Bubbles attempts to steal medical supplies from the responding ambulance. Officer Santangelo apprehends them, and they end up in an interrogation room in the southeastern district, where Keema and Jimmy McNulty discuss Bubbles' options with him. They insist that Bubbles give them some information to secure the charges against him being dropped. Bubbles claims to have little to tell them until Johnny reminds him of Cheese's shooting that Bubbles witnessed. In the process, he also tells them about the East Side drug dealers moving in on Avon Barksdale's towers, describing the situation as Bell and the East Siders sharing. Bubbles finally lets them know about the change in the quality of product being slung by the Barksdale organisation. Bubbles' revelations prompt Keema and McNulty to start surveilling the towers, where they see the two crews working alongside one another. Now this, for me, is just... The scene, in a way, feels ripe. It's absolutely ripe for just introducing us to Season 3, in a way. Like, this is kind of a big part of what goes on with Season 3, I guess. So it feels like it's just introducing us to that.
Yeah, no, definitely. It sets that motive for Keema and McNulty, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So Bubbles really sets things in motion. I was just... Best thing about that for me was seeing Santangelo again for the first time since season 1, and he's doing what we might expect, really mundane police work. Case in point, directing the traffic whilst the real police deal with the kind of ghetto's latest casualty.
And I think we can agree he's better off there.
Yeah.
He wasn't much of a detective or anything
what he
like
wanted.
That, so.
He's good with dunkers.
Yeah.
Although he does arrest Bubs, so he does make the only arrest in the scene in that moment. Not a particularly heroic one, but an arrest nonetheless. Bubs' attempt in the ambulance was pretty ambitious, particularly leaving Johnny in charge, who clearly, isn't capable of any sort of watchmanship.
It's interesting that we have one body, to do with the moving of drugs right at the beginning with Frank Sobotka. And then we have another body to do with drugs out here on the street, but this time it's the end user. Yeah,
it's the overdose, right? Is that? Yeah. It's quite crazy because the start of this scene, it looks like Bubbles and Johnny are kind of trying to work out what strain of heroin the girl OD'd on, and then attempting to try and find it because they really want to taste it. It's pretty dark. However you look at it, I was struck by their enthusiasm for the death there. So.
Yeah, somebody gets killed by something, and their response is, "Let's try that."
Says it all, eh?
Yeah, so nothing crazier than a dope fiend, I guess.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a nice link between the two drug deaths, definitely. And the true slacker in this scene is Johnny, despite Santangelo's presence, who doesn't do his job as the lookout, and can't remember anything in the interview.
What, Johnny can't?
Oh, no, actually, no, he's the one who springs to mind Cheese, right?
Yeah, he reminds
Yeah.
Bubbles of the fact that obviously Cheese got shot by Brother Muzone, and we saw that Bubble was there to witness that, and he just reminds him of it because it might be relevant information. So
Yeah.
he does do something smart when he kind of needs to.
Yeah, or he at least prompted some smartness. I don't think he could have actually explained it himself, but he at least remembered the seed that he needed to.
He had a good idea, but he didn't know it was that.
Yeah.
He's not allowed any intelligence. So yeah, then there's like a sort of small interrogation scene light with like that bit that we were just mentioning, and as you said before, it gives them the motive to move on to a big part of season 3, which is getting that co-op really on the move.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it's a great scene. We see Santi again being deprived of an arrest stat for the greater good.
Yeah.
And I guess since was it McNulty who solved his case last season? The one involving Madame LaRue and all that rubbish. They're kind of even now if that was McNulty or Bunk who managed to solve that for them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of karma coming back round for him.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah, I was just trying to picture the scenes itself, but yeah.
Yeah, I think Santi was both our favourite characters for that episode. How times have changed.
Yeah, well, I guess he's just not featured at all,
No,
has he? So
not at all. I also thought it was a bit kind of thin letting Johnny and Bubs off the hook. They only told them info that's clearly observable on the street, particularly as Keema knew the streets well enough to separate the East Siders and the West Siders.
And they do just spot them. I mean, I thought, I was just going to bring up that I thought it was quite brazen of the two crews to meet somewhere where they could be so easily photographed from a distance. They just go out onto the street, and as you say, it's observable. It's right there.
Yeah.
We kind of are able to see who's doing it, and what's going on, and what's happening just by taking a few photographs. And they're not exactly holed up somewhere or having the meeting in a secluded location. They're just out on the street.
Yeah.
So
But
I thought that was a bit careless of them for what are otherwise very organised. Yeah.
Yeah, and but Bubbles knowing this publicly available information isn't exactly valuable enough to get them off the hook. Although I guess the point is that they're more useful on the street than off it, as far as McNulty and Keema are concerned. Like, he is the eyes and ears for them, so they need him there.
Yeah, I mean, any other person or any other police officer or whatever in that room, they have no real tie. They don't really have the understanding of the rest of their knowledge that they might have and the position that they play on the street. And they just see them as another dope fiend, and they were trying to steal from an ambulance, just bang them up.
And that's a stat for them. So I think most other cops would be, interested in banging him up.
But we see with a little more information and a bit of a personal touch, maybe, that they could be let go. It doesn't necessarily make it a good thing, though. I think letting them get away with something that is pretty sinister, especially as the scene itself established that they see someone get killed by an illegal narcotic, and their instinct is to go after it and to end up robbing supplies from a vehicle that goes around saving people's lives. So, it is pretty questionable of them to do it.
Well, the subtext is there, yeah. It is pretty crazy. Okay, what are we on to next, Alex?
So our next section, bit more of Brother Muzone related stuff. Omar discusses Brother Muzone with Butchie. Butchie reassures Omar that Muzone most likely would not have been involved in Brandon's death, since his business is all New York and Philly. Butchie comments that Avon, Stringer, and Avon's father are all pure evil, so Stringer probably lied about Muzone torturing Brandon prior to killing him. Realising that Stringer set him up, Omar promises Butchie that he will get his revenge. So this is Omar realising how rather silly I think most people watching that would have thought he was being.
Yeah.
He's being very sort of emotional and very easily tied into, and I don't know, I feel like it's also somewhat hard to relate to because the Brandon and Omar relationship wasn't that developed, really.
No, it's been
We didn't
shoehorned
spend a
in.
lot of time sort of with them, seeing their relationship change and grow, and we saw a few nuances to it, and there was some scenes with them together, and it's clear that they're very close and that they have a sexual relationship, but it's not enough to really make me feel like, I totally understand how torn up Omar is about this. And that's why it felt somewhat disingenuous to me, that scene in the last episode, and how it's brought us to here.
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? I guess we came in at the end of a great thing for Omar. And seasons 2 and 3, he has Dante as his new boyfriend, and then he also has Ronaldo later on.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like Omar kind of never loves again.
I think it's clear that Brandon was, something special though in comparison. He'll
Definitely mentioned. Yeah, I mean, it's clearly made a big deal out of, because, like you say, we're coming at it at the end. For us as viewers, it's not. I don't feel like it's developed enough in order for us to really understand how Omar feels about it. But again, maybe you never know. Maybe that's something that they're trying to tap into. Yeah. Trying to make sense of these revenges, and the moral ambiguity of The Wire is always trying to find some kind of an excuse to leave it to our imagination, to leave us in the dark somehow, and to have that mystery be the enticing element of the drama, rather than us knowing everything and then realising how serious it all is all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
But maybe that's also excusing lazy writing, I don't know.
No, not at all. I think it's the reason we can have these great discussions right here, and we can have so many takes on different things, and all of them are quite convincing. So it's nice to have those places to fill in the blanks yourself.
Yeah. As for the rest of that bit, obviously Butchie, we kind of hear a bit more Butchie wisdom, him talking about it being all New York and Philly. I'm not really sure how he knows that, but he does.
Yeah. It's clearly Butchie is the source of all knowledge on the street.
Isn't it like he's his bank? He's Omar's bank.
That's right, yeah. It's another relationship that's kind of been shoehorned in recently. I think their relationship makes a lot more sense in hindsight, because we see later on Omar and Butchie have some great conversations, as well as season 5, where Butchie is used as bait to get Omar back into Baltimore. They actually smash a bottle of whiskey in his face and then shoot him, which is one of the more graphic scenes I can remember. So it's right now their link doesn't quite ring true either, I don't think. But it's nice to see that Butchie understands the street so well that he knew that if Avon had asked Muzone to be got, they wouldn't have stopped until they got the job done killing Muzone. I'm not quite sure how he knew that, but he clearly understands the nuances of the street enough that he's smelt the fish, even without being there at the scene of Muzone's shooting.
Yeah, clearly an experienced gentleman.
Yeah.
Should we move on? Very short one now. Very short one. Spiros and Prop Joe meet in the park to discuss their future business. Spiros assures Prop Joe that he has new people coming in to restart their operation. When Joe asks where they are moving to, Spiros smirks and walks away in silence. So it's a very, very short one, that one. Just the one scene with the two of them together, and we see their business relationship, and obviously that comes into greater focus later on.
Yeah.
But, Spiros maintaining that mystery, that air of mystery and intrigue, even with Prop Joe. So
business has gone on hold for Mr. Prop Joe, but with a promise that they'll be back and that there'll always be more, being the key things to take away, I guess.
There's a real inevitability about it.
There's confidence about themselves, and there's this kind of way of cyclical criminal life that they're ingrained within, and they won't be able to escape it. So,
always business.
Yep.
Not just always it's business, but always business. Like it's always there. It's always happening. It's always kind of
And it governs every decision I make. Yeah.
It's not just, I'm always doing things that are business. It's that business as a thing there'll always be someone who's going to sell it, because there's always going to be people that want to buy it.
Yeah.
It's so, like you say, the cyclical nature of that crime.
Absolutely. So it's a nice little scene, with a nice development for both Prop Joe and Spiros there. What do we have next, Alex?
Yeah, next is our last part for the street, where Stringer meets with Avon in prison to discuss Brother Muzone's failure to protect their territory. Avon worries that if they can't maintain their reputation, they'll lose their business, and he questions the complacency of Muzone. Avon chastises Stringer for asking Muzone who attacked him, and reminds Stringer that the drug game isn't just about his business class, but does accept that they must work with Prop Joe. Stringer meets with Prop Joe to give him the good news, and Joe informs Stringer that their resupply will have a slight delay. Their encounter is photographed by Greggs and McNulty, as we mentioned earlier.
So yeah, it's clear that they're drawing more and more divides between these two leaders, and their understanding of Muzone and who he is and how he operates are completely different. Avon is raging that Stringer asked this respected muscle who he had beef with. That's kind of his, as far as he's concerned, that should be private information. Is that because it's offensive to the muscle, or because they're better off not knowing so they don't get tied up with it? I don't quite know why, but
I guess there's the idea that a character like Muzone, because of what he does and who he is, and he has to maintain a certain authority around his character. If people were to know who it was that came after him, it's all about the rep, isn't it, with Avon? So in a similar way, Muzone carries that too. He has a certain reputation that he has to keep up, and the only thing that people ever need to know about anyone who attacks him is that they're going to get their comeuppance.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that anyone needs, as far as Brother Muzone is concerned, that's the only thing anyone needs to know about anyone who tries to come at him. In order to maintain that level of fear and notoriety and this kind of mythological presence that's developed around Brother Muzone, in order to maintain that, he needs to sort of not allow people to know that kind of information.
and it's
And Avon understands that.
Yeah.
Avon is all about that.
But Stringer's natural response is to feign an interest so that he can then help him, well, at least pretend to help him silence that person. He looks at it pragmatically with a business approach. And then, he even uses the word business, and talks about the cycles of business, peaks and troughs, to explain what's going on right here, which really, really gets on Avon's nerves.
Well, in terms of, again, this tying into these main themes about the game, they're basically just gaming him in a different way. They want to use different techniques to game Brother Muzone. Or to accept that they're being gamed, because that whole playing a role, as it were, as having this character or having this reputation and trying to keep it up. That in a way is like because it's like a role playing thing. Almost, it is like a game. So you're sort of gaming people in different ways. Stringer's game is through like subterfuge, through trying to bring people on side and to be manipulative, rather than trying to act as a tough guy and trying to make people be intimidated.
Absolutely. So it's good to see them really embodying their characters in stark contrast here, more so than in many other places. But what we don't get to see is Stringer's massive sigh of relief, which I assume he must have had, when Avon finally sanctions the co-op after all these words of being against it. So it's odd that I find that word hasn't got back to Avon about the East versus West truce emerging.
I always wondered that.
Like, we see loads of Barksdales on the phone with the outside world, and there's a bit too much insulation to be credible, really.
No one mentions it to Avon Barksdale.
Yeah.
About this huge change in operation in the Barksdale organisation.
Yeah.
So it is weird, for sure. I mean, it's a massive shake-up. But then again, I don't know. It depends to what extent the relationship of the upper echelons of the Barksdale organisation have to go through Stringer to get to Avon. Because it does always feel like that's the way. In the same way that when Frank wants to see the Greek, he gets Spiros instead.
Yeah.
There is also a sense that when things need to be done, people don't see Avon, they see Stringer. They go through Stringer first, and he is established as that number 2. So maybe that.
Yeah, I think in season 1 they built up a convincing array of evidence that Avon wants to stay away from phones. They want to build that wall around him. So maybe they are continuing with that Despite
I think
the
you're
fact-
right to question it, because I feel the same way to some extent. It is a bit of a sudden iron curtain around Avon. He just doesn't seem to know anything about it, but I guess there's some justification in it, although we don't see that at work. And that's where our kind of complaint about it may lie. It's somewhat justified, I think.
Yeah. And I guess that leads into Stringer and Prop Joe having a back alley meet. Where I think Stringer explains that Avon's finally sanctioned it, and Prop Joe explains that business is going to be slow for the next week while my people adjust to some shit. And Kima and McNulty are also present at this party, very, again, inexplicably. How the hell did they know where they were going to meet? Something I've never understood about this episode. There's no kind of plot seed that plants them turning up here or being tipped off. So, or maybe there is. Maybe I've just missed it all these times, but it's definitely worth anyone writing in to let me know if they do find one.
I suppose, but that in turn is somewhat at odds with what we were saying before about how easy it should be to catch them in the act, given that it is in such a public place. So
yeah, well, I mean, Stringer's and Prop Joe's meeting was really quite enclosed down a very anonymous back alleyway. Not quite like the cats and dogs of the hoppers, the slingers that are just at it. But yeah, it's kind of a good scene to see.
So yeah, that's the street. So if there's anything else you want to add on that whole area?
Yeah, that's good. I think it's nice to see Kima and McNulty doing what they love to do best. It's odd, considering how much of the season McNulty wanted to be in the detail doing the whole Doc's investigation. The last 2 or 3 episodes, that him and Kima seem to have been waylaid, don't seem to have been very involved with it, really. They seem to have been chasing other things, pursuing the streets and the drug alleyways that they like the best. And it kind of points how they're in many ways a more natural duo than Bunk and McNulty, because I think Bunk and McNulty is the show's typical double act that they try and build, but I think in many ways Kima and McNulty are actually a better fit. So it's good to see them doing what they do best, really.
And when they were in the interrogation room with Bubbles and Johnny, I thought it was nice that even the pure mention of Stringer gets McNulty's interest. Just the moment Bubbles even mentions Stringer,
Yeah.
he's like leaning forward in his chair and listening really intently. Like he's just kind of right on it. Anything to do with Stringer Bell, McNulty is interested.
Yeah, it's like not being able to arrest Stringer at the end of season 1 is a bit like Brandon for Omar. It's like that sense of vengeance has to come. Like it's a real hunger there. So no wonder they're straight back on the street, and they've kind of already forgotten about Frank Zabutka. And as you say, it just sets up a great, really convincing way for us to go into season 3.
It leads us in very nicely. Well, speaking of Frank Sobotka, as you just mentioned, let's move on to the Sobotka detail, which is our next major part. In fact, it's our largest part by some margin. So let's start with Daniels, Greggs, and Freeman as they discuss the disappearance of their Greek suspects and the identity of the mysterious man that Spiros met with. Not yet knowing of Sobotka's murder, Greggs reassures Daniels that the union leaders' cooperation could still break the case for them. That's just a very short opening bit before we get into the real meat.
Okay, yeah.
There's not a massive bit here other than them talking about the photos that they'd taken. And obviously at this point they have no idea that Sobotka's actually, Frank Sobotka's actually been killed. So
Yeah.
I guess we see a bit of innocence in this scene, and how the fact that they don't realise that they're, well, who was originally their main target and the whole reason that their investigation began is now being, dredged up from the river.
Yeah. And we see again that the police don't actually know that he dies until he doesn't come in for their appointment. Probably another failing on Landsman's part, as Landsman did turn up early in the morning to investigate. He responded to his mistake once, but not again, clearly. But I guess by this point they're a bit too concerned by the things to berate Landsman for his lack of effort.
Well, we'll cover this bit later in this section, but he does say, once they come on site, at least I remembered to call this time.
Oh, okay, that is true, actually. So it's just a
but we'll cover
bit of
that
a
bit.
lag effort. And it's cool to see them discuss why Spiros ditched the Benz in the parking garage, and it probably is a result of BD being over eager with the tailing. So all that ambiguity of the tailing last time, it looks like Spiros did clock her in the end, or at least became too cautious to go back to his Mercedes.
Yeah. Well, it's not too much of a surprise. She just seemed to come very, very close.
Yeah,
And Spiros being the careful man that he is.
absolutely.
So let's move on to our next bit. Daniels meets with Major Valchek and makes a case for Prez Beluski's career after he punched Valchek in the detail office. Daniels successfully maneuvers Valchek into not making a charge against Prez by pointing out to him the witness statements collected from both the police officers present during the incident as well as the FBI agents. Valchek then agrees that Prez can return to the detail after 2 months of midnight shift narcotics work in the Southeastern District, followed by a written letter of apology to everyone in the room. So Valchek being Valchek, but Daniels really goes to town with Valchek. He really plays with him. It's quite enjoyable to see how he has this kind of plan that it's slowly unfolding over the course of the scene. He knows exactly how to game Valchek at this point. He knows exactly how to push his buttons. And Valchek responds much as we would expect. He's trying to protect his reputation, funnily enough. Where have we seen that before?
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to hear him express... Well, it's not nice, actually. It's kind of horrible to hear him express his true feelings about Prez, and that he really is just a pawn in his daughter's game for him. He's just kind of, his 9 lives come from that daughterly link, and I'm not sure he cares too much about Prez himself, particularly following the punishment he gives him. Very shameful punishment.
Yeah.
Written apology letters. Ugh.
Yeah, it's all very churlish, isn't it?
Very, very petty, as it always is with Valchek. But it is also, I think, in this scene that Daniels first mentions the fact that Burrell has sanctioned the major case unit, as the case was deemed, important enough, as per the terms of their agreement. So, this is the episode where the major case unit is officially birthed, and that's one of the key elements of the show. So it's nice to see that has come to fruition.
Sort of tying in with our scene from earlier where we're just gearing up, we're moving on, we're getting ready for the next season.
Yeah.
So it's nice to know at this point that we can expect something, new very soon. I mean, as I've mentioned before, I didn't, I didn't watch the show when it first came out.
Nor did I know.
So I don't know if at this point people were anticipating season 3, if it had already been announced, or I'm not really sure.
Yeah. It was clearly in the pipeline for these guys anyway, wasn't it?
But yeah, at the very least, judging by the story here, it seems like they were ready to move on, just laying the groundwork for season 3.
Yeah.
Now the next section is a monster.
Okay.
So I'll take a deep breath.
Oh,
And here we
yeah.
go. Daniels, Perlman, and the FBI team meet with Irvin Burrell and Rules to discuss the case. With Sabotka dead just before he was going to act as their informant, Perlman tells them that the case has been stalled. Daniels reminds them of the arrests they have made so far. Though the FBI has little to show in the way of arrests, the unit is happy just to have enough evidence to force the union to change its leadership or face decertification. Rawls is still irked that his 14 J-Doe homicides remain unsolved. Then Freeman phones Daniels during the meeting to tell him that Nick Sabotka has come in and is ready to talk. Perlman and Daniels interview Nick in the detail office. He reveals that it was Spiros' offer to help Ziggy that lured Frank to their meeting. Freeman reveals to Nick that Ziggy signed a confession and that they also had the receipt of the murder weapon from the pawn shop where Ziggy brought the gun, so leaning on the witness would have unlikely freed him from the murder charge. Nick tells them that he found Frank's truck under the bridge. He gives them information on everyone he can on their board, including Spiros, Eton, and Sergei. He links Sergei to the killing of the crewman in Philadelphia by hearsay. Finally, Nick identifies the Greek in the photograph which captured him in the foreground, but is unable to give them anything beyond that. Freeman tells Fitz that it is best to keep Nick's involvement quiet. Fitz pauses before faxing the paperwork and then decides to check on Agent Kutris. He is dismayed to learn that Kutris has been gone from San Diego for a year and has transferred to the FBI's counterterrorism office in Washington.
Wow, that was a mammoth.
So it's a big one, but it's all part of this same bit, so it's all lumped together.
There's a lot to Nick's interview that we kind of need to break down, I guess, isn't there?
So let's start with the meeting, basically, with Perlman. We have the FBI team, we have Burrell, we have Rawls.
Yeah, so it's just kind of the big wrap-up.
Yeah, it's like a sort of big debrief.
Yeah, and they're just kind of going over each... I guess it's kind of what they've reaped from the case. The FBI are happy with what they've got. They've stopped at the Union. But we see that the BPD are very, very keen to push further here with Nick. And for me, this scene was all about Nick's interview, really, or interrogation at least. It was nice to see Nick pick up where Frank left off, because I think me and everyone else, we were really looking forward to the Sobotka confession scene that never happened because of his untimely death. So it's nice how they switch focus between Frank on the corkboard and Nick, while Nick's kind of filling in for Frank in that role, speaking for the both of them.
Yeah. It must be weird for Nick to see that detail board as well. For him to arrive there and they're all suddenly all these people that he knows and they're all linked together and it's like this big web of connections. That must be really strange for him to see, to have such a, what had become a major portion of his life mapped out in front of him on the pinboard.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact that he's been the talk of the town in so many offices behind closed doors must be a really freaky idea for him.
And the focus to Frank's photo over Nick's shoulder whilst he's talking. That's a very deliberate move.
The switching of the focus between the two, It's that brotherhood again. And we also learn here, of course, that Ziggy wouldn't have been able to get off the hook anyway with that leaned witness, because didn't they get his prints on the gun or something like that, some other avenue of evidence.
And he signed a confession as well.
Yeah, so
he literally signed a thing saying, "Yes, I did it." So it's kind of hard for someone who when people care so much about their stats, it's hard to say no to a written confession.
True that. And it makes Frank's death slightly less futile, as it would have probably happened down the line anyway, having heard this. So
what did do you think it's complete scamming on the part of Vondas to offer that, or do you think he thinks maybe they can do something?
It's weird because
they don't know what Ziggy's done.
Yeah,
they don't know how he's reacted to it. They don't really know Ziggy, so.
When the Greek and Vondas discuss it alone without Nick there, like they seem to genuinely believe that they can make it happen. But part of me is, wanting to believe that they're clever enough to understand that it's not a sure thing, and it may well just be Vondas's respect and fatherly affection for Nick that is speaking against logic here, quite possibly.
Yeah.
So, it's again another point of ambiguity and contention that we can only break down how we see fit, really. But it's nice to see that reveal. A bit of an anticlimax, really, for Nick's, or Frank's death at least. And it makes it feel very much less futile than it was.
And the final part of this big section is obviously with another reveal with Fitz.
Yeah.
Who, at the right moment, decides, just before he kind of grabs the paper, just before it goes into the fax machine, almost to first off mirror that moment from way back before where he was faxing that information off. He makes exactly the same maneuvers, but this time, he sort of grabs it before it goes through, and then makes has the quickness of mind, as it were, to find out about Agent Kutris, and then discovers that. It's not where he thought he was all this time.
Although not before he was prompted by Freeman to look him up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it must be a horrible revelation for the man. It's carrying a lot of weight for the detail that he had no idea about. So, yeah, but then again, can you even blame Fitz? You know, it's not something that he's knowing about or meant to know about. So it's a big
It's
web.
kind of suggested later on that, he's apologetic about it because he kind of knows that the Bureau is somewhat like that.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot he can do about it.
Mm.
So
Yeah, it certainly pays back for McNulty's empty suits comment, anyway. The end of season 1.
yes, obviously he seems to be somewhat aware of a degree of corruption. So,
Yeah.
whereas ironically enough, the only cases that they were interested in for the case on Frank Sobotka were corruption charges.
Yeah.
And it ends up being corruption that ruins the case, essentially.
And you could certainly argue that Kutris is more corrupt than Sobotka, even if not on paper.
So, looking in all the wrong places for corruption.
Yeah.
I think it's a nice little, what is it, bit of dramatic irony for...
Yeah, just a nice bit of irony, really. Just people not seeing it. And, yes, I mean, overall very good. It was nice to see Nick refusing to give up his men again. Horse was on the board, but he wouldn't go near him, wouldn't say a thing about him. And of course, the detail know for sure that Horse is dirty. They tracked all of his cans that he deleted. And he had nothing to say for the Madame either. I don't think anyone did. She was very elusive this season. But he did solve their awkwardly timed photograph, pointing out the Greek that they missed, which was cool to see.
Not that it tells them much, unfortunately.
No.
That's the Greek. Okay, do you have a name? No.
It just makes it more frustrating for them. And I think that scene's immediately followed by their airport escape, actually. So,
Yeah.
just a big fly in the face for them.
Anything else about that section?
No, I think that covers that huge mammoth. Almost took longer to read it than it did to analyse it.
Right, so let's move on to join Herc and Carver, who are left waiting outside Nick Sobotka's home. Herc convinces Carver that they have to leave the detail to get any respect. They become increasingly frustrated with their waiting game and eventually tell Nick's father that Nick must give himself up. They are outraged when he tells them that Nick has been in custody for over 12 hours already. Angrily, they march to Daniel's office, where they tell Daniels they feel like they are not being properly used in the detail. Daniels pleads that surveillance is part of the job, but Carver feels that they are being treated like pack mules and that Daniels disregards his rank in the department. Carver then points out that a post in the Western District is looking for someone for a DEU sergeant position for Major Colvin, and that he is going to request a transfer to it. Again, leading us nicely into Season 3.
Yeah, so I really do like the stuff with Herc and Carver this episode. It's nice to see Herc being perturbed with Daniels, just as we cut to Valchek's disappointment with him. But then also, just as Carver talks about Daniels being there for his people, being very loyal, we see Daniels fighting Prez's corner with Valchek, which is a nice real parallel they brought out there.
Yeah.
We see Daniels really wins for Prez here. He really comes away without that much punishment at the end of the day. He has to write a few letters, but career-wise, fairly unscathed. And so I think overall it was nice to see that parallel there. And I do love the unprofessional scene with Carver bashing down Sobotka's door. I completely forgot about this scene.
Yeah.
Just the number of F-bombs that flies out of his mouth is pretty impressive. You can understand the frustration.
Bit of unfortunate foolishness on their part. But yeah, you can completely understand how irritated they must be. They've been almost completely forgotten about. The whole case has moved on and nobody has thought to tell them, even though they're supposed to be the guys keeping the eye, on the street. They're on ground level and no one thought to tell them.
Definitely. And when they eventually talk to Daniels about it, I think Daniels takes the wrong approach to kind of resolving it, really.
Seems pretty unapologetic, doesn't
yeah.
he?
I think he's still
It's not sorry about that.
He's just caught up with the case, isn't he, in the thrill of it. which means nothing to these guys who haven't been, they've been absent for it. So, as you say, he should have apologised and seen things more clearly from their perspective, I think.
Especially as the thrill-seeking members often, the modern urban crime environment, they've not really had any of that. They've not had any of their excitement. They've, like you say, they've been totally detached from it. Just surprising that Daniels, who we normally consider to be a very genial person, very professional, just doesn't even so much as apologise here.
Yeah.
He's not usually that selfish and that forgetful to be a little bit basic manners.
Well, I think he was hoping that Herc and Carver would get caught up in the excitement of their discoveries as well, and it would kind of be the form of the apology he was hoping for, but it really didn't work because he couldn't see things from where they were sitting. He hadn't sat in that car all night, and could see they weren't in the mood to learn these things. So, I think it was well intentioned, but it just wasn't thought about well enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there was ever any kind of certainly no malice, and certainly not just because he doesn't care for them or anything like that. As you say, we've seen plenty of evidence already that Daniels obviously cares about his people.
Yeah.
That's why he wants them to be getting caught up in it just like he is.
Yeah, definitely. So.
And as I said, this pointing out that Carver is on his way to the Western District. He's going to come under the wing of Bunny Colvin. That's
right, because Daniels has, to some extent, been his wing so far, particularly at the end of Season 1 when he had that fatherly chat about, where you want to go and how you're going to lead people and what people
if you make it about the work, it'll be about the work.
Great speech. And I feel that kind of plants the seed for what Colvin teaches him later on.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so
the
I think
next section?
Yeah, of course.
So Freeman and Bunk try to identify the body of the Philadelphia crewmen from their records of headless and handless corpses. Beatty and Bunk travel to the Philadelphia port to ask more questions about their crewmen's disappearance. And after little success, the officer finally reveals that they keep security tapes on file. A review of the tapes shows that the license plate of a car rented by Sergei, placing him at the scene of the murder of the crewman. When confronted with the footage in an interrogation room, Sergei finally begins to talk and gives up Vondas for the murder of the crewman, who he implicates in the death of the girls. Sergei's account wraps up the murders of the 14 Jane Does, much to Bunk's delight. So finally, all of those Jane Does get cleared, because Sergei, the man who we normally expect to be very tough and very ruthless, and to stonewall pretty much everything he comes up against, he finally breaks, and he finally finds himself in a position where has no room to manoeuvre thanks to these security tapes, and they're able to manipulate in a very wonderful fashion where they're sort of skipping through them and able to enhance details, and it all teeters on the edge of CSI kind of style camera trickery, but it never quite crosses the threshold, which is good.
Yeah, definitely. It was 'cause it's just good to see that his toughness kind of overtakes his brains on many occasions. He likes to talk about how much he rips the head off and rips the fingers off people on the phone rather than kind of keep it quiet, and in the same way he kind of likes the thrill of that violence out in the open rather than being smart about it. And he got caught on camera and it came back to haunt him, and again it was nice to see him crumble. There was just no defences left for him, as you were saying. So it's quite nice how Bunk and Beatty made a little trip to Philly.
Bit of a comedic scene there.
Yeah, I love the fact that the videotapes were such an afterthought. Again, police just not quite having their heads screwed on. I thought it was really nice how they, on a side note, tied in those video monitors with McNulty and Greggs, who in the very next scene consider buying one to monitor their baby as the baby sleeps, which was pretty nice. But yeah, so it was kind of good to see that, and there's quite a few things in this section, really, isn't there? There's I guess mainly the Sergei interrogation. And we see there's an awful lot of fingerless and faceless people across, not even the country, just across mid-Atlantic region, I think, is where Freeman does the search. So they're really trying to remind us that Baltimore is not a special case place. It's a very prolific practice across the country, and that we see that Baltimore isn't necessarily special.
There's just a lot of those little satisfying moments in that interrogation scene where we see them, just pinning implication after implication.
Yeah, it's like a big
on Sergei.
It's like a big dominoes effect, isn't it? Really.
Another one of those scenes, giving away these details wordlessly.
Yeah.
Just pointing towards photos and the like. So, yeah, it was nice.
And I doubt that Sergei was expecting to see a picture of the Turk with a face and arms. It was nice that they could pull his face based on the tattoos. Which the Greek actually looked at and commented upon before he murdered him. So you may have thought they would have made more of an effort to eradicate these, because they're quite a big indicator of body type, but clearly not for those guys.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think that the whole reason they're removing hands and face is to remove their identity.
Any form of identity, yeah.
But they actually keep the form of identity that
that's the most
identifies him.
obvious, yeah. So that really sort of, I guess it's perhaps it speaks to the protocol of what Sergei does, like the headless and faceless, and the handless is kind of their signature, and that they believe that insulates them from all implications. But clearly, they just had a bit of a tunnel vision and didn't think about those tattoos, which were a very obvious, as you say, indicator of identity. So it's kind of cool to see that come back and haunt him. There's a big string of unfortunate events for Sergei, really.
Yeah.
Particularly as they actually pretended to discover the the zoom-in software with the CCTV in front of him, just to like really choke him. I hear that the video lets you zoom in all the way. Oh, really, Bunk? Show me. It's just fantastic taunting. And of course, Rules. We don't actually see. Actually, we do see Rules' excitement with the 14 homicides.
Yeah.
Solved, but we have to wait a little while yet. I think they actually let Rules stew a bit longer than they have to before they tell us.
Yeah. Yeah, very satisfying, especially considering how much importance was placed on clearing these murders and how impossible it all felt when that whole deal was coming together. I mean, Bunk must have felt like there was literally no way that he was going to do it. I think he says on a couple of occasions that it's impossible. He cannot possibly have imagined himself being where he is now, being in the interrogation room with all the perfect cues lined up to get his confession and get those Jane Does sorted.
Yeah, absolutely.
He probably had never imagined himself in that position.
Yeah, they did a good job. And does this bit include the bit where they find the dirty package on the docks? That
is the next bit.
Okay, excellent.
I'm just going to throw in the little bit here that we had earlier. I suppose technically I should have put this with the bit between McNulty and Kima earlier, but I'm going to put it in here just because it's somewhat chronological here. So back at the detail office, McNulty and Kima check with Freeman about information on Prop Joe's supply uptake from the Greeks, and they learn that he recently doubled his order. At the docks, the detail find the Greeks' last shipment of drugs, and they decide to keep watch on it. Bunk reports his information on Sergei to Daniels, who presses him for more information on the Greek. Sergei reveals a location that the Greek uses for meetings. Daniels moves on the Greek's hotel swiftly, but is once again a step behind. Spiros and the Greek are shown checking in for a flight at Baltimore-Washington International Airport. So yes, on the topic of the drugs and the drug shipments here. So we obviously see that there's all these drugs that have been left there, millions of pounds worth. Greeks obviously not losing that much in the grand scheme of things by doing such a thing.
No, not at all.
And they're able to slip away again because they tip off, and they're able to just escape away through the airport.
Yeah, it's nice how Fitz was able to identify that dirty can. miles before it reached American shores as well. With the reach that guy has, I think most things that come from Le Havre, France, seem to have the dirty tags.
Or Le Havre, France.
Le Havre, France. Le Havre. But yeah, it's cool to see that, and then obviously they could instantly intercept it as soon as it arrived. So that the benefits and the disbenefits of the FBI are very starkly drawn here, particularly as Fitz guiltily walks away when Daniels laments about how the Greeks got onto them at just the wrong time. Now that they have all this reach to find the dirty packages. So, I mean, props for Fitz for taking care of Kuchis at this stage, though. It could have got a lot worse if he left that floating or left it hanging.
Yeah, I guess this is a little bit of their good news being taken away from them, although we still have Bunk's victory with the Jane Does. In terms of the case from the detail, they get all of this information and Sergei is able to give up this meeting place and everything, and they feel like they're finally about to swoop in and make the final arrest, and it's snatched away from them at the last moment. Yeah,
there's never always a clean house, is it? Although they do put Sergei on death row, which I forgot to mention. I think he's the only character who gets a death penalty charge in the show. So he sits on death row for the rest of the show, and we assume he dies at some point.
It's possible. Obviously, there's a link between when they're in the airport itself and they're going down that escalator, and Spiros asks the Greek, did you forget something? And he's like, "Oh, nothing important." And then obviously when they go into the hotel room, there's those what do I call them? Those beads.
Oh yeah,
I've forgotten what they're called now, but
there's some sort of sentimental beads, or
yeah. So it's interesting that the Greek leaves those behind, and we see that obviously this is representing how he doesn't care for sentiment. He's not leaving behind. Yeah. He's not leaving behind sentiment or nostalgia. He's just leaving behind a place of business. Which is again another direct Marlowe quote. "I ain't one for sentiment." Yeah. So it's a nice parallel drawn between those guys. I don't want the man's spit. That was always a favourite Marlowe quote of mine. Yeah, I don't want the man's spit. Okay, I forgot the context for that one. It's when he's talking with oh God, I forgot his name. But where he's going to make a deal with him, and he's spits in his hand to make the deal with him. Oh, okay. I don't want the man's spit. Yeah, season 4. Okay, yeah. Well, I'll be looking forward to that episode. Because my memory is still not refreshed on that at the moment. Yeah, I may be remembering it slightly wrong, but he definitely says those words. We'll keep an eye out for it later on. So, yeah, absolutely. So they're making their way down the escalator, descending into more hellish depths. And I do like the fact that the Greek's final line is that great epigraph, "Business, always business," or whatever, that when he's at the counter. A very, very fitting and sinister end for the Greek storyline. I think he does come back. He appears in a couple episodes, but it's really Spiros who takes over from the Greek in later seasons. So, yeah, a really, really quite horrible arc and very, very creepy character. And just no justice. Yeah. They do all these horrible things and commit these massive, massive crimes on a huge scale. In the eyes of the law, they're pretty much as grand as criminals can come, and they just totally get away with it. Yeah, and in fact, they're protected by the very kind of institution that's supposed to be there to go after them. Yeah, definitely. So there's just no way around it. Well, I say they're protected by the institution; they're protected by an individual in this case. Yeah, no wonder Spiros is so confident that there'll always be more business. Yeah. So yeah, that's that section. Okay. We have one last one for the Zapotka detail. Okay. So with their casework over, members of the detail drink in a bar. Greggs and McNulty use their photos of Bell and Prop Joe to convince Daniels that they could be a target for the major case unit. Fitz tells Daniels that the leak was from his agency and apologises. Frank Zapotka continues to haunt Major Valchek from beyond the grave, as he opens a letter from Brisbane, Australia, with a photo of the surveillance van that is still making its way around the globe one port at a time. Walczak whispers sadly in Polish, "Rest in peace," on behalf of Spotka.
Oh, that's what it was it?
Yeah.
Okay. No.
So it's, this is kind of like post-case, basically. Everything that happens as the casework is done.
Yeah, I do like the after-work drinks. It really does feel like a kind of epigraph to the season, or a real closure. And I like how Beatty feels bad that McNulty is still pursuing Rhonda. There's still those relationship dramas brewing underneath everything with the facial expressions. And we see Fitz kind of milling around a bit further away from the bar and apologising to Daniels at the right moment, which is nice. And then
It's funny that he's kind of there being a little bit out of place.
Yeah.
Somewhat fitting, I suppose, as it would be between the FBI and the city police.
Absolutely. And Herc and Carver as well, they're kind of a bit out of place, symbolically away from the bar at one of the tables. Still feeling that frustration, that lack of importance.
Yep.
And then we get the Beatty's line, "The world keeps on turning," huh? And another good epigraph contender, I think. And we get a sense of how she's so new to all of this and not weathered to the world of homicide policing. And that she's really been on quite an emotional journey through all of this, particularly with Frank seeing his end recently.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see her.
When they go to see the... when they turn up on the actual scene later on, like I mentioned, when Landsman is like, "At least I remembered to call." Her response is so sort of striking. There's a quite a little bit of attention paid to the fact that obviously she knows Frank and has known him for some years, and then to see him there staring at her, with his throat cut and everything, it's terrible. And she's been through an awful lot through this detail. She's learnt an awful lot. She's developed real skill. She's gone from someone who's sitting right in the back seat and observing and just trying to do one thing at a time to, in some cases, actually leading the actions of the detail.
Yeah, it's been
earlier on.
A really good season for her, and I like how he came back to the opening scene there, because there is that really nice moment where I think the frame just gets Beatty and Frank in the they kind of share a moment together. Well, Frank's dead, of course, but you kind of see the real sense of loss in Beatty's eyes, but also the sense of responsibility. She ultimately instigated his cooperation with the police, so she's really feeling the weight of it on her shoulders. So it's nice to see that. And I think it really wild her up when they mentioned the defence wounds as well, because we imagine a Greek henchman overpowering him and slicing his neck. It's kind of a real nice way to ratchet up the trauma of all of this.
Yeah.
And they really set a visual precedent for it with the Turk in episode 2. So it's a really toiling time for Beatty.
It's a shame that she's such an afterthought for the rest of the show.
Yeah.
Never really comes back with any major presence throughout the remaining 3 seasons. Again, I don't really know if that has anything to do with the actress's schedule or anything like that, but I mean, Amy Ryan is so good in this role and is really quite an impactful character. It seems strange that she's not really ever used again, but I guess if there's no real reason to keep up with it, and if she's going back to the docks and she hasn't got a place on the, she's not a member of Homicide or anything like that, she can't suddenly become a detective. So in realistic terms, because she's no longer related to the case, she's just kind of put back in her old position and back to the patrolling again, as we see later on in the montage.
Yeah, and I feel like it's only really been this season, or this time watching it, that I've really appreciated her arc through this season. I think previous times I just dismissed her as a bit of a grounding character for the audience, the newbie who has to get used to the way things work. But having seen it, I think maybe the 3rd or 4th time I've seen season 2, it really did change my opinion of her in the last few episodes. The way she learns the independence and really makes things work with Frank at the end. So I think it is, as you say, a real shame that they have to drop her. But you really feel like there's nowhere they could have inserted her into the show, really. I mean, it's so packed as it is. And we already know they have to drop a few of characters in season 5, like Cutty disappears, Bunny disappears. So it's a very, very unfortunate situation, really.
And then, lastly, Valchek is, opening this letter from Brisbane, Australia, and the saga of the surveillance van continues.
Yeah.
It's managed to get to Australia.
That's it, yeah. The world keeps on turning.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it's finally kind of symbolically reached the other end of the world, and forgot about that.
Strangely touching for Valchek to, offer a prayer or, thought for Sobotka, this man who had been hunting all this time, albeit unsuccessfully.
Yeah, it's nice that he's able to jab back at Valchek beyond the grave. He has the last laugh still.
It's almost like Valchek weirdly has respect for that.
Yeah, it's kind of, there's definitely something quite affectionate about that Polish moment. Yeah. So yeah, overall a really nice kind of conclusion to the season.
There's three other smaller.
Oh god, okay, not quite the
three
conclusion.
other smaller sections that we have before we get to our montage.
Yeah.
And the three smaller sections are to do with home life and sort of domestic goings on. The first one is a very short one. We have Kima and Cheryl who are shopping for baby products, and they continue to be at odds over the baby. So there's just a minor scene where Kima is looking incredibly out of place at the store as they go shopping for things. She doesn't seem to have the same kind of enthusiasm or connection for all this baby stuff as Cheryl does at all. They don't even, at this stage, I don't know, it doesn't even seem like they're kind of in much of a relationship, really. Like, Kima just seems totally disinterested in the whole thing, not just the baby, but Cheryl.
Yeah.
And
Cheryl's really trying as well. She's really trying to keep it together.
Yeah, it's I kind of feel sorry for Cheryl. Again, it's one of those things where sometimes when you watch the show the first time, the characters that you root for or the characters that you feel sorry for, they change around as you watch the show more. They can kind of chop and change and go back the other way sometimes. It's weird. Once you really understand these people's motivations, and in the case of Cheryl, like you say, she's trying very hard to keep this relationship together. She's really making this big emotional effort. She's got to deal with pregnancy. She's got to deal with all these things she's got to buy. Kima is making no effort whatsoever. And there's a child involved, so it's pretty easy to sympathise with Cheryl here, and from a certain point of view.
And I like how they introduce this bit with a nice McNulty parallel, because Kima and McNulty are scoping out the street, and then Kima looks at her phone and says, "Oh shit, I'm late for something," which is exactly what McNulty did in season 1 when he was late for picking up his kids' beds from IKEA, I think. I'm late for something, so it's obviously I now have to go back to my domestic dispute and leave my passion behind for a little bit.
Yeah, this isn't important, it's just something.
Yeah, exactly. So it was nice to see that. And yeah, just the shopping was a good indication. Cheryl looking very, very heavily pregnant. And babies and the finer things in life just aren't Kima at all.
Yeah, there's a sort of tomboyish aspect to Kima, I suppose, where all this slightly more maternal, girly kind of loving all these cute little baby things, like, that's just not Kima at all. She's just not interested in that. She wants to be, as we've seen before, the woman who gets out of her car and confronts the guy being rude to her and pins him to the car and handcuffs him. That's Kima.
Exactly, and she voices
She's
that
a
quite
lady
well.
of action.
When she rejects the cute babyish water bottle handles and says, if the baby can't hold on to it with her own damn fingers, we got problems. Like,
Yeah.
It's a complete epitomization of their conflict there, and so it's a nice scene. Well, not a nice scene, but certainly very informative one. And I guess
Our next domestic and home life bit, if you want to move on to that.
Sure.
Nick, Ashley, and Amy are placed in protective custody in a basic motel by the FBI. Nick tells Amy sarcastically that they finally have a place together. The following day, Nick leaves their motel to head for work. And Lala tells them there is only one ship to unload, so their lack of seniority means another day without work. So this is what this is pretty much the end for Nick. This is where they end up. They end up in this protective custody, and maybe in a way this is Nick's comeuppance for going down that route, even though he didn't really have many choices. But this is where he is now. He's in protective custody, supposed to be starting a family, wanted to build a life and get a place, and now they're going to be protected by the FBI for goodness knows how long, stuck in this motel. He's not working. They got a child to look after. I think Amy's concerned here again. We have another kind of domestic parental situation where there's a real desperation to it. What are we going to do now? Where do we go from here?
They introduced the witness protection bit quite late in the episode as well. And I remember being really shit scared when I first watched it, because I was like, oh gosh, what horrible move are they going to throw us at the end here? Why are they showing us this? Are they going to have one final assassination just to really throw us over the edge? But that kind of never comes, although it feels to be threatened at every stage, particularly with that lurking car that always hangs around. I know it makes sense to have that car as your witness protection, but you kind of feel like it adds to the tension a lot more.
But it's also been somewhat deflated to some extent, because we've already heard the Greeks agree that they're not going to make a move on Nick. So
they're on the plane, yeah. So it's nice to see. I think those scenes work quite well with the Cheryl and Kima ones, where both the couples don't really know what the future holds. And we see Nick ironically tell Amy that we finally got our place.
Yeah.
That we wanted.
Really dark.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, where we've had two couples who are in a position of uncertainty, our third and final one, which originally I realised I hadn't written a piece of the recap for, so I'm just adding it in now. Where we had two couples who are unsure of their future. We have Cedric Daniels and Marla Daniels, who seem to have their positions very clear with one another. They're not sleeping in the same bedroom anymore. That's made very clear. Cedric is interrupted with that phone call. It's a very small scene. Like I said, I didn't actually write a piece on the recap for it, but I'm just bringing it up now. And it's like a phone call. I can't remember who's on the phone now. Is it?
I think it's just some sort of shift lieutenant telling Daniels
just
about...
some random person telling him about it.
I think they're telling him that Nick is coming in to chat to the detail.
Yeah. So there's that bit, and we kind of see a bit of their home life, and it's basically it establishes that they're clearly very much at odds, and they know exactly where they stand with one another, it seems.
Yeah, they've clearly got a plan for how they're getting beyond this, and it's a very pragmatic, stringery plan that involves careers at the heart of it, particularly Marla's. As we see, she is planning to kind of go into politics, and she's not going to let Cedric ruin that for her. So Cedric is going to stick around when he needs to stick around and wear the right uniform. So again, more of a season 3 setup taking over there.
Yeah.
So good to see that.
So let's go on to the montage. This is our epic closing montage. Bear with me just one second, actually, because I'm just looking at my recap now. And for some reason, this bit, I haven't done any line spaces on it, and it's going to be very hard to read when it's all done like that, so I'm just going to do that. There we go. Right, so our closing montage. As Nick mourns his uncle's death by staring out over the water near the docks, a montage of scenes from around Baltimore unfolds, and it has Steve Earle's Feel Alright playing in the background. US Marshals closed the Union Hall with a lockout. Johnny 50 urinates on the Greek's last container full of drugs, still under surveillance, and makes an obscene gesture at the watching policeman. Perlman prosecutes Eton and Horseface. Rawls and Landsman giddily celebrate the clearance of their Jane Does. Ziggy serves his time. Clay Davis and other Baltimore politicians break ground on the condominiums that will replace the grain pier, demonstrating the futility of Sobotka's efforts to save the pier. B.D. Russell returns to work at the docks with the port police. During a pensive moment, Freeman dismantles the Detail's investigative board, leaving up the photo of the Greek. The drug trade continues in the southeastern district, with Frog's crew finally driving an old woman to sell her home. Poot and Puddin warily watch the police cruise their territory. The stevedores get drunk on a street corner. Prop Joe takes a shipment of drugs from the back of a truck, and the truck also dispatches a group of disoriented women. Business as usual for the drug and prostitution trade. And finally, a series of images of industrial decay around the docks flashes on screen. The montage concludes, and the season concludes as Nick walks away and rain begins to pour.
How's that for a foreboding finish?
So there's our water bit at the end as well, given that it's all about docks and everything. It seems appropriate to have a bit of water at the end.
Yeah, definitely. So a great montage.
So Steve Earle's Feel Alright is playing over this montage of Steve Earle obviously playing the part of Waylon.
That's right, yeah. Although we won't see him again until season 4, yeah, so it's nice that he's involved. And he also performs the 5th version of Way Down in the Hole as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Season 5.
So going through from the list that I'm just looking at, it's somewhat notable, I think, to see Johnny 50. He's kind of there, and especially when he's like getting drunk on the street corner, and he's like being hauled off the street corner by, is it Nat Coxon?
I think it's Lala, I think.
Oh, is it Lala?
Yeah.
So he's like hauling them off the street. It's kind of somewhat telling that later on in season 5 we see Johnny 50 again, and he's like a part of the homeless people.
Yeah.
It's kind of that's clearly his trajectory now that he's essentially, jobless.
It totally makes sense. Yeah, it's exactly what I thought as well. It's kind of setting that up very nicely. And we see, I guess, the main thing to take away is that while our characters have ended up in somewhat different circumstances from before, the ultimate theme is this cyclicality, particularly, perhaps most obviously shown with Beedie, who's back in the squad car, driving around the empty docks. So the characters are changing, but the institutions are going round in circles. And it's really shown perfectly there.
The bit where you have Clay Davis and those other politicians, they're like sort of, doing the whole photo shoot. They're digging into the ground with their spades. That's part of the season 3 title credits, isn't it? Yeah,
that is true. And a direct callback to a very early scene in this season where Valchek speaks to Krawcheck about the docks and whether the guys down there should have money or not.
Yeah.
And we now see that the granary has gotten a go-ahead to be condoed rather than dredged, as Frank hoped. So that gentrification on the cards, and it's all pretty crazy stuff. And believe it or not, that structure in Baltimore was gentrified, I think, the year or so after this season. So it matched up perfectly with the time frames. It became condos.
We were talking about characters that have their moment for this season and just completely disappear. We also have Ziggy. We see him sort of marching along with the other inmates, but I mean that's it for Ziggy. He's in the system now, and we don't see him again. It's pretty tragic to have someone of such importance in one season just get kind of brushed aside like that.
Yeah, he's ended, hasn't he now? Just time for a little 10 seconds in the montage for him. And I quite like how the montage overall is another dream-style sequence for Nick that he appears to be waking up from, a bit like last episode. So it's, again, then a really nice finish for him as he walks up that hill, that uncertainty ahead of him, and that car nearby and that rain falling. It's a really grim but really kind of beautiful image to finish the season on.
And of course, it shares a similarity with the final montage of the whole show in season 5, where it starts with McNulty standing there looking out over the city. And then it sort of, in this dream state, as it were, it then goes into the montage, and then it exits with him sort of looking back out the street and going, okay, let's go home. And then here in season 2, it starts with Nick looking out over the grain pier and over the docks, goes to the dream estate, comes back, he moves on.
Yeah, it's been
So
like
it's kind
a
of like the
reflection
montage.
for Nick. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the montage is a reflection of their thoughts and various experiences of what's going on around the city. So it's a technique that gets used again later and possibly used again somewhere else. I might be forgetting.
I don't think the other montages have that. It kind of starts in one place and ends in another. But yeah, I guess Nick and McNulty do have their special montages, which is good to see. So yeah, I think overall a very, very impressive episode and an impressive season.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know if you've got anything else that we've missed that you want to say about the episode.
No, I mean that's the recap. In terms of talking about everything else in general, I say we move on to our final sections, which will be greatly extended because I'm sure we'll include a bit about the season as a whole. So
Yeah.
let's move on to our final sections.
Business or pleasure for you?
Business. Always business.
What'd you forget?
Nothing important.
And we'll start with the title. It's obviously Port in a Storm. Somewhat similar to Storm Warnings. Obviously, it's referencing it to some extent.
It's like the second stage, isn't it, afterwards?
Yeah, we've had our warnings. Here's the real deal. Here's the sort of the major bit.
Yeah. And the only literal manifestation of that title is perhaps the end where the rain starts to fall. Otherwise, the weather's pretty good. So, but we obviously know that the title was quite encompassing of the episode as a whole in terms of what's going on at the port and the fact that it's closing down and is being taken over by the FBI.
Yeah, I mean, I was it's reading about on all the various pages in IMDb and the wiki and Wikipedia and everything. To see if they'd said anything about the title in particular, and there's obviously one theory about it being a reference to the proverb "any port in a storm."
Yeah.
Which obviously is a proverb about how people will take help from any source when they're in a crisis, and we do have moments of that in this episode. So we have, Bubbles asking for Kima for help, and vice versa. We have Nick's going to the Greeks for advice, and then he turns to the detail. Avon finally accepting that they need to take help from Prop Joe. Sergei finally realizing that he needs to help the police because he has no more bargaining chips left, as it were. So it's kind of people taking whatever they can get in a time of crisis.
No, that's nice. Yeah, I like that interpretation definitely. What did you make of the epigraph?
So business, always business. On itself, it's not a particularly memorable epigraph. I wouldn't when you ask me about the epigraphs of The Wire, I wouldn't really bring it up per se.
Okay, no, I'm a real big fan of this one.
I think it's good. I don't think it's a bad epigraph, but I don't think it's particularly amongst all the epigraphs of the show. I wouldn't really pick it.
Yeah,
out
it's certainly one of the
offhand.
simplest.
Yeah, and that's I guess because of its simplicity, it suffers a bit in the overall epigraphs of the show. But in the context of this episode, it's definitely very good.
Yeah,
and we talked before about it being a relation to the cyclical nature of the crimes, and that it's not just business that he's always doing; it's the fact that business will always be there.
Yeah,
if there's supply and there's demand, it's just going to keep going and going.
You can kind of feel it echoing over the ending montage, can't you?
I guess that also leads into season 3, because when it comes to Amsterdam, that's what Colvin is doing. He's sort of accepting the fact that it's always going to be a business thing, it's always going to be there, and thus let's make a place for it. So
yeah, definitely.
But yeah, back to this sort of epigraph in the context of this episode.
I mean, it applies just as much to this episode as it does to the whole show, really. It certainly speaks to the world going round, as BD talks about it, and the montage at the end. So I'm a big fan of it, and I just like the fact that the Greek says it with such sinister kind of delivery. and it really kind of underlines that character's arc as something quite special.
Yeah. So what about... I'm sure this is not going to be made easy by it being finale, but what about any particularly notable characters for this episode?
Part of me feels compelled to pick Nick, I guess. The montage, as we were discussing, kind of is wanting us to think that this is his episode, the way that he reflects on the season at the end, and we finish things off with him. And it kind of makes sense. He's the one who's been through the journey, and he's the one who's come out the other side with the story to tell. And he's also someone who we're going to leave behind now until he comes up for a little cameo in season 5. But I think he wasn't in it much. I mean, his interrogation was dealt with very well. So I think I feel compelled to pick him to some extent. And I really do enjoy Herc and Carver in this episode as well. Particularly Carver, who seemed to be seeing things beyond Herc, understanding the value of Daniels rather than just complaining about him as well. And another strong Daniels episode. I think Daniels had some great moments here. He's kind of consistently involved, never too much, never too little, so it can be hard to pick him, but I think he stood a little bit shoulders above the rest in this episode. So him as well. And finally, I think I'll go for... I think it was nice to see Kima and McNulty out on the prowl doing what they do best in season 1, and the way they turned up at the end of the pub scene, the celebration pub scene, kind of reminded me how they were getting back to their roots, and it got me very excited for season 3. They were laying the groundwork for the major cases unit to come.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I think I would echo a lot of that. Definitely Nick. Pablo Schreiber, I'm not sure exactly how it's pronounced, but that's the guy who plays Nick. I just think he does a really good job to us the whole show. I think especially in moments where they're not necessarily strong scenes for Nick, but I think he does well. Especially, I think if we mentioned before that scene where they're on like that roundabout thing, and it feels like theatre, you know, where they're sort of talking about Ziggy when he was younger and how he always used to be he was a fuck up then, he's a fuck up now sort of thing. With is it Prissy?
Prissy, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that whole bit just feels like a sort of bit of student theatre almost. But he still manages to give a pretty convincing performance despite that. So yeah, I think he's really good throughout the whole show. So definitely fair to mention him in this episode, which, like you say, is framed somewhat from his perspective more than anyone else's, especially with the montage.
Yeah.
And he goes on to he's in Orange is the New Black, isn't he? He's Porn Stash. Mendez, is that his surname?
That's right, yeah, I completely forgot about that. They're such far removed characters from one another. It's beyond
he's
belief.
Such a comedy character in
he is funny in Orange is the New Black, though. Like, he is it's so extreme and ridiculous.
He's good at it.
Yeah, he's good. I can still remember those scenes where he goes to the pub with Bennett and he completely changes his persona and kind of starts crying. Wow. It's so odd how I completely forgot that they were related. I mean, it just speak to his diversity of acting, really. Yeah.
And yeah, likewise, I was going to say Kima as well. I think Kima's very good, despite what you may think about her actions. Definitely portraying that same kind of parallels to McNulty, and over the course of the show, she's built up in that way as well. She shares a lot of similarities with McNulty, and I do understand what you were saying about how in some ways they are a better double act, mainly just because they're so alike.
Yeah.
I guess they're a duo in that sense.
It's just kind of Bunk and McNulty are the comic duo, and then you have Kima and McNulty as the kind of buddy cops almost. It's yeah. And
we also have a comedy duo in Herc and Carver as well. So.
Oh yeah, no doubt, no doubt. What about favourite scenes then? Have you got any that you'd like to pick?
Now that definitely is difficult.
All of them?
Yeah. I don't know. I really liked. Well, I didn't really like it, but I was really struck by just how horrific the opening scene was. Just seeing Frank Sobotka and there, like I said before, the calling card of the Greeks with his throat cut. Maybe it was just because it happened to be right at the start of the episode, but that really struck me, that bit, and how his eyes there staring, and later on with Beady, and it's very, very striking scene. I would also mention the scene with Nick in the detail office. I thought that was nice again because it's a good performance from Nick, but also just having all of these things revealed and tying up all of these loose ends, and the fact that after all this long sprawling case and how impossible it all seemed to solve at one point, Nick finally gives them all of this insider information. It was a very satisfying scene, I found.
Yeah.
And also the bit at the end, just to cap it off, it feels like a very nice closing scene for the detail where they're all in the bar at the end, and Fitz is hanging off, to the side, somewhat out of place. Herc and Carver still feeling somewhat isolated and being treated differently, and they're off in the corner. Beady looking on as Perlman and McNulty seem to share a somewhat tender moment. It's all very nicely pieced together in order to create that sense of finale. It's nicely done.
Yeah, really, really good dynamics there. Every character in that bar plays a really distinct role, which is great. So even if they don't say anything. So yeah, there's some great choices there. I'd kind of add just the final montage. I don't know if that's cheating. And the way the montage is framed as well, I think it's possibly the best kind of framing of the montage. That final scene really does hit home, more so than Omar's Bronx hold up in the end of the last season, which felt a little bit ham-fisted in, I think.
It didn't really do anything for me. That ending.
No,
I don't think it was just
didn't
kind of
really make
all
a point
in the game. Okay.
Yeah. And then we have Nick's interrogation, as you mentioned. Again, the discovery of Frank. I do enjoy the Greek hotel scene. Them discussing their next moves, and Spiros then relaying that to Prop Joe. Really nice to see the way they operate and with the confidence with which they operate. And it's hard to go by without mentioning Sergei's interrogation scene as well.
That was good. Another satisfying moment. Lots
really
of things
satisfying.
coming out.
They really take their time to fly it in his face. So yeah, just a bunch of really great scenes. And of course, this is the only one that was directed by Rob Colesbury, I think, as far as episodes go. The last episode of the show to be made before he died as well, between seasons 2 and 3. And there is an homage to Rob Colesbury in the first Detective's Wake of that season for us to look forward to. So quite fitting, really.
So
of course, Rob Colesbury played Ray Cole for those.
Oh yes, yeah.
That didn't know. So
Just
yeah,
to clarify. So yeah, let's sort of take a little bit at the end of this episode just to talk a little bit more about season 2 as a whole, seeing as this is our finale. What about the season? What are the key themes in season 2 for you that differentiate it from season 1?
Yeah, so it's kind of, I feel like most seasons they're kind of taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture. So you kind of introduce something, and then you try to explain why it won't go away or it's endemic. It's really nice to get that perspective of the docs, and we see where these drugs are coming from. And I think when I first watched the season, before I really got invested in the characters, the best moment in the season was seeing how Prop Joe and the Greeks connected when Prop Joe turns up at that Pyramid Inc. warehouse, and you're like, oh, finally this season means something. It's not just a complete diversion. It's kind of building towards this larger story. So it's nice that it does that, but it also has these themes of the working class dying, of showing a different side of America, and a very cynical outlook on capitalism and the efforts of trade unions. So overall, it's a different vibe to season 1, certainly. A different form of working class. I guess this is working class, whereas season 1 is, I guess it's below working class, really, isn't it? It's unemployed, drug woven kind of ghetto environment. So it's very nice to see those changes.
Yeah, like you say, it's interesting. I'm surprised they didn't capitalize it on it more in a way. It's because it is a significant difference to the others. Is that normally we see the drugs in their state of being
Consumed,
trafficked on the street,
yeah,
and then being consumed. And this is literally like where it's. I mean, it's not the it's not like the actual lab or the any of the sort of cooking up places, or like you see in Breaking Bad where they're actually making it. There's no, we're not seeing the plants themselves or anything like that. It's, but we are seeing where it's coming from and how it's coming into the city, and how it's coming in such large volumes, how it's getting distributed. So that in itself is a sort of key part of the season, and we don't see that at any other point until much later on when it's tied together with the organisations as a whole. But season 2, as you say, it's that transition period. It's about a city trying to handle a transition, going from relying on a lot of this manufacturing and dock working and basically sort of industrial era stuff to this post-industrial city that is no longer relying on those things. But the city as a whole isn't. The city as an institution, to some extent, is not relying on those things to develop. But a lot of its people are still stuck in that area, and they don't have any means to climb out from this chasm that's been left behind by a change in economics.
Yeah.
And it's ultimately a very, very bleak ending, much like season 1. I mean, the season 1 ending was pretty bleak. Season 2, even more so. Just because the sheer number of people that we see heading into these darker existences.
Yeah.
People like Ziggy, who it's just obviously, pushed himself into this position, partly his fault, partly not. People like the dock workers, we got Johnny 50. We know that, obviously we know, having seen it, he's going to end up amongst the homeless people. It's a very fatalistic ending.
Horseface would have joined him if he hadn't been locked up. So
yeah, and it's all tied around inevitability and things being cyclic, things going to keep happening no matter what you do. It's a very kind of fatalistic finish to the season.
Absolutely, yeah.
Very little optimism to the show in general.
No. I mean, there are some moments. I think the happiest thing in that montage was Jay and Rules looking at their black names on the board, their smiling faces.
Yeah, the good news is the stats. Hooray for the stats.
Yeah. But it's kind of nice that they got solved as well. I can feel the celebration there. But it's, as you say, incredibly bleak, and it feels bleaker than the other ones, but I really doubt it is when we go to watch them. It's broadly similar themes, but also some of its own unique ones, as we were talking about. And I think season 2 really is the odd one out as far as the Wire seasons go. It really does take the biggest divergence, and it really doesn't become clear why it's doing this until quite far down into the season. So I can understand why it really does divide many viewers, and I know that there's a big stream of thought within the community that season 2 is the weakest, alongside season 5 perhaps. I know that a lot of people recommended to skip this season because you don't really need to watch it, which is a complete nonsense really.
Yeah, I would never recommend that.
It's actually, I think if you do, I can totally understand that. As I was saying earlier, this season was difficult for me. I only really, really got into it when I noticed that Prop Joe was getting his supply off of the Greeks. It suddenly made sense to me, and the stakes were higher, and it had really, it made season 1 richer for that reason, even though it wasn't that related to it. But I think that this really benefits from rewatches, and it's now possibly my favourite season of the bunch, actually. And I think it does have the slowest build of all of them as well, and therefore has a more clearly signposted kind of beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely rate season 2 as at the very least. I mean, it's probably my second favourite, I would say, after 4.
Yeah.
But I would never advocate skipping it or anything like that. When I first watched it, I don't remember being disinterested by it or anything. I think I remember being very struck by how different it was to the first season. The fact that it was very much based more around this working class kind of all the stevedores and all the docks, and it was a big change of pace, a big change of location. But yeah, there does seem to be a certain negativity surrounding it, just because it feels like a bit of a spare part as the seasons go.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's not hugely tied into the rest of the seasons and their place on the street doesn't make it useless. It's still incredibly enjoyable, and it's a really, really dynamic season. Serious highs, serious lows, and an ultimately incredibly bleak ending. Possibly the most bleak ending out of all of them. In some ways. So.
Yeah, I'd certainly say so.
Except for maybe the very big finale. Which has its good moments.
That kind of has a sense of hope to it, oddly.
I suppose so, yeah.
Yeah. Can't quite explain it. We'll have to wait for our...
We'll talk about it more in context.
In about a year's time when we get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to go over before we finish up?
No. Yeah, just great episode. We almost... I think actually now we've surpassed our 2 hours, which is mandatory for season finales. So hopefully we've pleased the fans on that front. Or the listeners, at least. I'm not sure it's wise to call them fans at this stage. We'll have to see. Just thanks for sticking with us through this second season, guys. We've really appreciated your comments and feedback and just your listening.
Yeah, it's been great.
And
I don't think we plan to pause, do we? Just go straight on to season 3.
No, all being well, we'll be back this time next week, and season 3 will have started. So,
yeah, looking forward to it. We'll be jumping straight in, and like you say, I mean, it's just been nice to have people emailing us in, and knowing that people are sticking with the show and following it along. And it's strange to think that we're now moving on to season 3. I mean, we're well over halfway now. So yeah, it's exciting. So thanks again for joining us. We'll be back next week. Like I say, we're going to be starting season 3. If you want to send us anything, any of your thoughts about season 2 as on a whole, then you can contact us on the website, or you can email us at caughtonthewire@gmail.com. If there's any things that you disagree with that we said about season 2 as a whole, or if you're one of those people that maybe doesn't enjoy it as much as a season, and we'd like to hear why that is and what your thoughts are on it. And until next week, take care of yourselves and take it easy.
see you then. Thanks very much.
What you know about Baltimore?